Imagine for a moment that history is not merely a sequence of events. Imagine that history is a clock, a great cosmic clock, turning not only through years and centuries, but through states of consciousness. Every civilization, every nation, every people stand at a particular hour upon it. In 1988, Elizabeth Clare Prophet issued a warning that sounded anything but mythical. And she said this: whoever gains control of space will have a decisive military advantage for 50 years, and perhaps indefinitely. And this was not science fiction. It was a diagnosis. And beneath it was a deeper question. And that deeper question was, are we spiritually mature enough to hold the power we are about to claim? Now, Saint Germain has called for 50 years of peace. He made that call at the end of 1987 in a dictation. And with those 50 years, Saint Germain is convinced that he can bring the planet and her people into a golden age. Now, if we take that timeline from when he originally made the statement or made the call to us as light bearers, as keepers of the flame, we have about 11 years remaining in that timeline. Now, that call was not symbolic, it was timed. Once upon a time, America touched the moon. That moment was not merely technological, it was civilizational. A nation decided, collectively, that space mattered, the vision mattered, that destiny mattered. And we had daring, we had coherence, and we had leadership willing to say, this is worth the cost. But when the Apollo era ended, something subtle and potentially dangerous occurred. America didn't lose intelligence. It did not lose innovation. America lost mission. Heavy lift capacity was dismantled, continuity was broken, access to space became rare. It became expensive and fragile. The space shuttle, yes, it was brilliant, but it was singular. It was linear. One ascent, one arc, and one loss. There was no return, no regeneration, no rhythm. Elizabeth Clare Prophet would later name this not as a technical failure, but as an energetic one. She placed America on the 6 o'clock line of the cosmic clock, the line of the Divine Mother, the base of the spine chakra, the place of survival, embodiment, continuity. Now, when this line is weak, what we build cannot endure. Energy cannot rise, and vision collapses under its own weight. A civilization that cannot hold what it creates cannot safely expand. And then, after decades of drift, something unexpected occurred. Not in bureaucracy, not in committee, but through a single question. And that question was, why do we throw rockets away? So if you think back to a few moments ago, the Apollo era, the rockets were used, they were launched, and then they were lost. So why do we throw rockets away? And for the first time in history, in our known history, rockets began to return. They landed upright, they were refurbished, and they flew again and again and again. And this was not merely innovation, it is what we can consider the restoration of continuity. The Divine Mother does not expend life once and discard it. She cycles, she restores, and she builds through rhythm. Reusable rockets restored rhythm to spaceflight. Cycle instead of spectacle. Memory instead of loss. Wisdom instead of waste. So in cosmic clock terms, the 6 o'clock line began to heal. Foundation could once again support ascent. And so the nation can also start to heal. Elizabeth Clare Prophet taught mastery of space requires the mind of the Buddha, but mastery of time requires the Divine Mother. Time is not clocks. Time is continuity of energy. A civilization that must start over every time it reaches upward has not mastered time. It has only borrowed a moment. Now, Saint Germain has called for 50 years of peace, not as a guarantee, but as a trust. 50 years in which continuity could be restored. 50 years in which time could be mastered before space was claimed. 50 years in which humanity could choose wisdom over domination. And with those 50 years, Saint Germain was convinced that a golden age could be born again. And if we are aware of past ages, we know we have mastered space and time in aeons gone by, in the far history of this earth and of humanity, and we have claimed golden ages in the past. So with those 50 years, as Saint Germain said, he is convinced that a golden age could be born. And that becomes quite a responsibility for humanity. The clock has been turning, and the question is no longer whether the heavens are reachable, but whether we are ready to fulfill what that time was given for. Now, before we listen to the dictation by beloved Saint Germain, it may be helpful to understand the moment from which it came. The message from beloved Saint Germain, delivered through Elizabeth Clare Prophet in November of 1987, was spoken as a final appeal, not a condemnation, but of responsibility. It addresses the destiny of America and the role of conscious individuals at a pivotal hour in history. In this dictation, Saint Germain speaks of time running out, of a narrowing window in which freedom, justice, and spiritual awakening could yet be secured, not through force, but through conscious action, vigilance, and the raising of sacred fire. He calls upon the light bearers, not as spectators of history, but as participants, those willing to stand, to keep watch, and to anchor higher law through their own hearts and lives. So we have quite a task ahead of us. And we've been in the throes in that energetic vibration for quite some time, some longer than others. Now, throughout the message, you'll find themes of accountability, calls for accountability, free will, the defense of freedom, and the Divine Mother's action in history. They're all woven together with urgency by Saint Germain and also much compassion. Now, as you listen, you may hear Saint Germain use strong language and vivid imagery. pay attention to those, and then accept the accountability and the responsibility for what Saint Germain is asking of us in that dictation. Now, the words that he gives us are not meant to inspire fear, but they are meant to awaken us even further to where we are at this point in history and space and time. Awaken a remembrance that spiritual dispensations are entrusted to humanity and that what is done with them matters. What we do with the dispensations that we have been given over many decades, that the masters have shared with us their teaching, what we do with that is, it matters for us. It is a responsibility. So this dictation at its core is a call to presence, responsibility, and the conscious use of light at a critical moment in time. All we need to do is to look at where our world is at this time. And it's not just our nation, it is worldwide. Are we ready and are we willing to stand to the call of Saint Germain and bring whatever we need to bring of ourselves, of our hearts, from our minds, to bring that peace into manifestation that Saint Germain has called for?